Hi everyone, I'm Steve Towns. I'm Deputy Chief Content Officer for Governing Magazine. Welcome to our Q&A with Albert Garcia and Mitchell Gorsen from Cisco. Albert is Cisco's Business Development Manager for Broadband, and Mitchell is a Public Funding Advisor for the company. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having us, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to address your constituents.
Yeah, glad you're here. So we've got a really important topic to talk about today, and that's improving digital equity or closing the digital divide. This is, as everybody knows, I mean, it's been a long-running issue that certainly got more attention over the past 18 months or so as the pandemic forced us, to do things like work and classes and government to citizen transactions through the virtual and digital channels. But really too many people lacked the connectivity, the equipment, the skills to access those resources. But good news now is, I mean, there are growing opportunities for states and localities to tap into federal funding programs to really make progress on this issue. And I think that's what we're here to chat a little bit about today. Albert, maybe first we go to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about the biggest challenges that governments faced and kind of continue to face in terms of addressing the digital divide?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've made strides over the years. I mean, I think the federal government has been funding broadband expansion since way back in the Clinton administration. And so I think we've made tremendous progress. But when the pandemic hit, all things went a little kooky, and there's no doubt that it went from a must-have to an actual lifeline necessity. I mean, seniors couldn't access healthcare services, students couldn't access their learning systems, and right here in New York City, where I live, it was clearly an issue of affordability. I mean, a quarter of the students couldn't connect to advance their studies, and so it was, it really put an interesting spotlight on the problem. It became less about a rural accessibility issue, and it really, became a multidimensional issue in terms of the approach that needs to happen, because it's more about affordability. It's more about prioritization of how you spend your money. It's also about education, understanding what services are available online and what's out there. And so I think the challenge for local governments is really to understand where and why are the unserved and underserved constituents that they have, and really build strategies on how to address them. But it's also about a coalition of the willing, as I like to call it, right? Is looking at new players in the market that could potentially help advance some of these issues, right? Looking at not only for-profit partnerships, public-private partnerships, but also looking at how nonprofits could lend a hand, and looking at how government could potentially expand services to include, right, making their communities more online friendly, their services more available online. How the government should, review how their constituents access healthcare services online, and how they can expand educational services to make sure that there's more of an online presence.
Yeah. Albert, let's stick with you. Talk about some of the solutions that are available today to expand broadband services.
Yeah, the good news is, there's been a lot of advancements in broadband and how connectivity. I mean, you're seeing a lot of unique ideas. And one thing I would tell you is there's no one solution that's going to fit everything. I mean, I think everybody's focused on, let's get fiber to every single home. And sometimes that's really becomes, especially in very rural parts of America or mountainous areas, providing fiber everywhere could be extremely costly. But there are, real down-to-earth solutions that could be provided, that could provide adequate services at a very quick level. And so, governments should look at and not, be too religious about one technology or the other, but, look at holistically what's available and what makes sense. I think also governments should look at how they could expand their own services, as I mentioned before, right? Making sure that their entitlement services are available online, making sure that their educational system has more forward-thinking, online or more forward advancements in educational services that could be available online. And so I think Cisco could definitely help in this area to help deliver more of these digital services online. Cisco's also a leader in both wired and wireless technologies. We enable not only governments but also service providers to be able to provide broadband services and data services throughout the world. And so we have optical solutions that could provide fiber to the home facilities. We also have optical services to provide middle mile, or where consolidation of broadband services occurs. We also have wireless and fixed wireless solutions to be able to provide connectivity to users or expand their fiber footprint wirelessly to mountainous or more rural parts area at a more cost-effective way. And so those solutions could be used to be able to access their users in more open areas. We also coming out very soon with our private 4G, 5G offering. We also have a backhaul wireless service, as I mentioned before, to expand a fiber footprint or to provide a backhaul service more in rural areas. So I think there's a lot of unique offerings that we can provide. But the first thing is really to evaluate the situation and see how multiple technologies could be used to facilitate a broadband project.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, it sounds like there are a growing number of options technologically to kind of fill those gaps, and their different pieces are going to make sense for different parts of the solution or situations. And you really need to
Exactly.
kind of understand that or see that. Mitchell, let's go to the other side of this equation, and that's really, how do you pay for some of this? And I think, I mean, there really are a growing number of funding opportunities out there that states and localities can take advantage of, right? I mean, talk about what this audience needs to know about some of those opportunities.
Sure, Steve. The brief news is help is on the way. The federal government has enacted legislation that is the largest single funding source for broadband ever enacted. It's of historical nature, and the money is sufficient. And the biggest challenge right now is how to spend that money faster.
Yeah.
So let me describe the pools of money. There is money available for planning, infrastructure deployment, and adoption. And I'll go into those specifics. Planning money is generally used for coverage maps and the kind of design that precedes the deployment. The infrastructure building funding includes funds to build the systems, monitor, and adjust. Adoption really includes subsidization for users and digital literacy and skills education. Now, the federal government funds that have just been enacted are not new. Historically, funds have been available to service providers to expand their footprint in very rural areas where there either was no service or the service was generally inadequate. With COVID came along a lot of money for telehealth, distance learning, remote work, and economic development, community redevelopment, and the broadband needed for the connectivity for those programs. Now, the latest round passed by Congress last year, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, includes additional funds for broadband infrastructure as well as skills-based learning and subsidization of individuals. Furthermore, there's additional funds for tribal governments as well as middle mile networks.
So, like Albert said, I mean, this is a kind of multi-dimensional problem, and there's kind of multi-dimensional funding now available to address different aspects of this, which sounds like, I mean, is good news for everyone overall.
Absolutely. And we have some lessons learned from our early deployments. So this is what we've learned so far about the grant process. It is challenging and complex. Learn the details are really important. Retain an expert. And I would note that the Cisco Public Funding Office has experts available to our partners and our government customers who need to know those program details. Let's talk
Interesting. So
about
it's really going to help you to work with experts to get through this process itself. Um, any thoughts on how to effectively get to these funds, or some of those lessons learned?
absolutely. There are grants just for service providers, grants just for state and local governments, and other grants which are a combination of public-private partnerships of government, nonprofit, anchor institutions, and service providers. The grant programs also have restrictions about where the money can be spent if the area is unserved, underserved, or it has multiple servers, but there's persistent poverty. Again, knowing those rules really important. How much money is available also varies considerably by grant. There are maximums as well as matching requirements. The matching requirements can be as little as 1%, but as high as 25%. And knowing which grants allow other grants to be used to pay the matching requirement also requires some level of research. I would note the most important exception is that the Infrastructure Investment Act, Jobs Act, passed last year by Congress, does allow CARES Act funds approved in 2020 and 2021 to be used. Now, collaboration with other local governments, including towns and cities and counties nearby, is really important. The applications to the NTIA and the FCC, which make use of collaboration amongst multiple governments, are going to be better scored. So, Steve, I hope that answered your question.
I get your point about the complexity around it. That sounds like bottom line there's a lot of funding available, but you really do need to know the rules around how to get that money and use that money to you know to use it most effectively and to get to it most effectively. Um, so yeah, Mitchell, really really interesting stuff. Um, Albert, you want to talk a little bit about how governments can use these funding opportunities to kickstart a cohesive strategy around addressing the digital divide?
Yeah, and you guys bring up an interesting point. Is there is a lot of ways to use this funds, but it really starts with a strategy, right? And really starting to organize yourself. It's a lot of work in some regards to start understanding how to access the money. Requires some fundamental work, and remember that this is unprecedented funds. And so I think every local government should take advantage and really do a cohesive study in terms of really understanding future needs, because this money isn't going to be around forever. And so take advantage of it. And so, starting, with a clear, plan involved, right? And so we always, want to stress the fact that at a high level, we want to really start with, putting together. I think every local government should start to put together a local broadband action team, right? And that team can consist of various, advisors, whether that be, high-end government users that really understand their needs and future needs, but also business and residential users that understand the needs and future needs that they need, but also community anchor users, and really collect a needs assessment of what's out there, so that you're building a cohesive strategy, and then send out surveys to really understand the services that are available today. Understand what services are out there to be able to connect. Understand what costs are associated to that, and obviously correlate that with the needs that you've garnered. And then from there, start to build out a community playbook. That playbook could then start to provide information such as market demographics, broadband surveys, performance characteristics, and also start to correlate that with any public assets that could be leveraged for a broadband project or other utility or road projects that could be leveraged. For instance, there may be a road or a utility project that could leverage a trenching of fiber to expand your fiber footprint in those areas. And so with that, you can then produce a more technical specifications for services, and then engage the private sector in terms of what's out there, what's available, and what the cost would be associated to really expand services in those communities. And I think there's a lot of funding, as Mitchell mentioned, that's available. And some of it is very stringent in terms of, technical specifications that are required in terms of bandwidth that needs to be provided, but there's also very flexible ones that could help expand government services and educational services. For one, I know there's the state and local fiscal recovery funds that make it that there's a considerable amount of money as part of the ARPA funds that could be used to expand, right, the government network, to expand government services. So that these things are available online that could expand healthcare connectivity and things of that nature. So there's more flexibility in some over others. And so in all of that, obviously, obviously Cisco through our funding office could provide assistance to understanding the details surrounding a lot of these funds. We also have business architects that could help create the collaboration needed to understand the needs assessment of the governments as well as the community. And we also have, and obviously there's a number of consultants as well that can help in this area. We also have, Cisco has a Cisco Innovation Center that could be leveraged to understand the technologies that are out there and are available to be able to address these needs. So I think we can certainly help in terms of kind of bridging that connect.
Yeah, it's a real exciting time. Mitchell, any last thoughts on they want to leave this audience with, particularly around that funding?
Sure. Collaborate. Talk to your colleagues in other counties and cities and other states. Adopt their best practices. Repeat them. They work.
Well, I want to thank you both for chatting with us. I mean, as I think you guys both said, I mean, this is a huge opportunity to address an issue that really impacts your community, and take advantage of it. So I appreciate the insights and appreciate you guys spending some time to talk about them.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.